Estate Podcast, Bryan.
Thanks, Matt. What are we talking about
We're talking
today?
about anything. So we've been doing this for a while, and we got the name, the Real Estate Podcast, which is pretty cool.
That's a pretty awesome. That's like getting realestate.com or
Yeah,
commercial.
we were shocked, but it's really easy going. So real estate's kind of a fundamental belief that Alex and I have in a way to create financial freedom. Mm-hmm. But, last episode we were talking about restaurants in Round Rock. We've talked cannabis. We've talked all kinds of things. Yeah. So we appreciate you being here. Cool. And ultimately what we would like to do is to kind of go through your background as much as you want to, like even from where you grew up to where you are now. I know you've, from my perspective, you've had an interesting background because you've gone and were very successful with business, and now you've taken a little bit different approach. Still business, but not so much focused on making money as much as possible, I believe. So we'd love to hear about your background, and then we'll have tons of questions, I'm sure, throughout. But ultimately, just easygoing type conversation.
I'm glad to have it. So like both of you, I mean, real estate matters to me. Real property matters to me, and that goes back to being a kid, right? I moved 19 times before I graduated high school. Wow. Not counting the couches that I surfed on. And because I don't know how many of those there were, right? Mm-hmm. It wasn't, I have parents that are still married today. It wasn't that it was an unstable home. It was just financially, the time and age that I grew up in, I had a lot of turmoil for my parents, and we ended up moving a lot. And that, that always became an issue in the back of my mind in two ways. It made me really fluid in my life and made me adjust quickly to change. And it also gave me this kind of love for housing that I didn't even know I had when I was 18, 19 years old. But when you sleep in the back seat of a car, you
miss your house.
You miss a house. You realize just how important having a pillow is at night.
Yeah. Were they chasing jobs, or what was the...
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a product of several different things. I think the best way to say that is my parents did the best they could with the totality of resource available to them. And made some good decisions, made some bad decisions. We're in some good positions and we're in some bad positions. And it just led to a financial firestorm for them. And, growing up, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, mostly in Texas, although I'm not from Texas originally. But mostly, in North Texas, which is a relatively good market, but it struggled as well. Housing inflationary rates were going through the roof in the early 80s and kind of stabilized in the mid 80s, and they were, subject to that. Job market was flexible. My dad was a reverse engineer for CAT scans and MRIs. He a self-taught guy, learned how to take CAT scans or MRIs, disassemble them, reverse engineer them, and teach people how to fix them. And so as that industry changed and the need for education became stronger, he found himself displaced in the workplace and had to struggle for a job and just kind of plateaued. And so anyway, it created this interesting thing, and I joined the military. And
where were you born? You said you were
from Texas. So I was born in
Texas.
Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay.
Moved to Minnesota. We lived several places up there, and then came here to Texas, to the little town of Garland, Texas, which isn't so little anymore, up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then you joined the military.
Joined the military, and the first day I joined the military is honestly the first day of my life I remember having 3 meals and having 2 changes of clothes. And and I say that a little tongue in cheek, but it really is. It's the first time I remember having that.
Yeah.
It was the first real point of stability in my life, and I absolutely loved it. 5 years, 9 months, 22 days that I served, and people thank me all the time. They're like, "Oh, thanks for your service." I'm like, "Man, thanks for letting me serve."
Right.
I mean, what a great country that we live in, where somebody who doesn't have other opportunities can make the choice to go and serve, to do that, and have a lifetime of blessings attached to it.
Was it stability that was nice or new for you and something you craved? Or was it also a sense of structure too? Or was your childhood structured to a certain extent, even with everything going on?
Yeah, childhood wasn't real structured. I came in, I was come and go. I got my first job when I was 10 years old, cleaning the engine bays of cars at a paint and body shop before they got painted. And, I've worked nonstop since then. I had the lawnmower company and with a borrowed lawnmower, cutting grass and...
So it has been structured to a certain extent then, right? Like, or you were disciplined enough to always be...
There's a difference between discipline and survival, and I work for survival. I work to, be able to help my family and to be able to eat and have clothes and play a game of Galactica, whatever that video game was called, Pacman.
Galactica.
Galactica, thanks, yeah. Every once in a while at the Mr. Jim's.
Arcade.
Now the convenience store on the corner next to the Dairy Queen. I couldn't afford the ice cream, but I could play a nickel video game. So it wasn't discipline; it was necessity. And so the military. I think it was both. I loved the structure. I loved the camaraderie. I loved the opportunity to advance and to have a clear, defined system in place that I could follow, and I knew if I followed, opportunities would come. And so it was a combination. It was probably the best thing that ever happened to me was the decision to join the military.
Wow. And where was the military experience at?
Yeah, I was stationed all over the world. I went to Alabama for basic training, Fort Benning, Georgia for special ops airborne school. I was in North Carolina at Fort Bragg for a while and overseas for a few years, and in Louisiana. And
Traveling.
Bunch of little places that along the way that were really short-term deployment things.
Yeah. And what branch was it?
It was Army.
Army?
Yeah.
Very cool. Just random, but on the subject of people saying thank you for your service, do you think that some people don't like people saying that to them that were in the military? There seems to be something weird about that I don't know if I understand.
So,
do you know what I'm saying?
I do know. I know what you're saying. So there are some people who really value their time and their service, and they understand what a great benefit it was to them, and it's kind of humbling. To me, it's humbling when somebody says thank you for your service. It's humbling to me because I look at where I came from, right, and then I realize my ability to go to school. I've got 3 degrees, right? My ability to earn all of those degrees. Some things like healthcare. The life lessons and leadership, that was really founded on the principles I learned in the military. So when somebody says to me, hey, thank you for your service, I get the intent behind it. You can do the math of when I was in the service and look at what's going on in the world, and it wasn't the easiest time. It's by far not the hardest time that people face. And so it's kind of hard for me to hear sometimes, honestly, when people say it. I don't know how to respond sometimes, right?
It's a weird dynamic because I don't know why, but I sense that too. And obviously, I respect the military and people that do it, and I feel that way. But for some reason, I feel like some people don't want me to say that. Yeah, well,
so the other part of that is kind of a socio-demographic roller coaster that happened. When going back, let's go back 75 years, right? And you go back to the end of World War I, World War II. Our veterans were treated as heroes when they came home. Mm-hmm. The Korean conflict saw us start to see a change to that. Folks serving in Vietnam, they got treated like crap when they came home. It was an atrocity of what we did to that generation. And there's a lot of that generation walking around today. And and they remember how they were treated, the limited opportunities that they had when they came back. And so for some of those people, when you say thanks for your service, it's almost a slap in the face because it's like, hey, I went and served. I got shot at every day. I did things that, my government country asked me to do things that no human being should be asked to do, and I gladly went and did it for seemingly no purpose. And you treated me horribly when I came back. Why are you thanking me now? And so I see that and I recognize it. My generation, it was a different story. The Gulf War was going on. Macedonia happened. Black Hawk Down, became really publicized during that time, and the plight of what we were dealing with in different parts of the world. The realization of not only television coverage on the 5 o'clock news, but 24/7 coverage on the internet. And so my generation was really kind of respected. When we got on a bus, people gave us the preferred seat. And if I flew in uniform, if anybody got bumped to first class, it was me. And if not, we got treated well. And there wasn't this whole, we're starting to see a change in that again. So protracted wars that we've had since 2000, since the World Trade Center, since 9/11. The protracted wars overseas, the difference of impact that it's made on our soldiers, the amount of PTSD that they're dealing with because of what they've been exposed to, and then how that generation is being treated. They're being treated much more like those who served in Vietnam were treated than like those who served during the Persian wartime or the first two world wars served. And so I think we've seen this kind of roller coaster. And
it's interesting to think about that.
All that plays into effect.
Yeah, it's a history, and one of my concepts that I keep preaching on is like more and more I learn, I feel as if there are very few things in life that are black and white, and everyone tries to make it that way, and there's just shades of gray all over, just like what you're talking about. I mean, back it up to the history of this. I mean, there's different generations that feel different ways about it. So there's very rarely is there one exact answer.
I'm agreed, and you can look at all the aspects of our nation and what makes our nation so great, and you can see that gray that intermingles itself between the red and white of our flag, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I'm still proud to say I'm American. I love our country. I love where we live.
You should be.
And I am. And,
right.
Yeah, and
we are too. I mean, we feel so blessed. And I had to bring this up again. I know I talked about this last podcast, but I did this training the other day with the Round Rock police officers, and we had to go into a room with a gun and like operate on what we would do. And what I realized, just 3 experiments, is like that is the hardest thing ever. And even that for a police officer, what's still tripping me out is like there's not a yes or no, A or B answer. There is a gray area, and your decisions could put you in jail for life on what you do. I'm like, this is like the most complicated thing I've ever done. I had no training, obviously, but if more people experienced that, they would probably have a lot less judgment on Monday morning quarterbacking on what happens in certain situations. Yeah, I was just fascinated by this.
So I don't talk about it much at all, but so I went in as a military policeman, a 95 banger, and I got to Fort Bragg right after the last plane went to Desert Storm officially. And so I stayed back and tested parachutes. That was my job, was to get up, exercise, work out, eat some breakfast, go to the rigger shed, get parachutes, and test them. And that's what I did. Mm-hmm. What a fun job. Grab on this parachute and see if it works. And you see how it works by jumping out of an airplane.
Oh, test it like that?
Yeah, test it like that. Like literally go
pull random. Just like looking at them.
No, like them. randomly go pull random parachutes, get with the team, and you go test them. But during that time, I got pulled into. So I was on the All Army Marksmanship team for shooting 1911s, 45 caliber pistols.
Nice.
Yeah, I wasn't that good. I was an alternate, but it was still fun. And
I've got one gun into 1911.
Yeah, the nice guns. And then was able to start getting involved with what was called MOUT, Military Operations in Urban Terrain, which is effectively close quarter combat. It's enemy termination, principal extraction. In urban environments, and that's became what my specialty was. That followed me through my military career, and that's what I did. Was
what I'm talking about. Those
what you're
situations.
talking about, but in the military, the difference was we were in the age then of that was in the age of live video, and so we were part of what became what we trained was not only how do you make those split second decisions. But what does that split-second decision now look like on a live feed to the Pentagon? So if you're in Macedonia and you're going into a neutral place and you're in a building in the middle of the night and you make that decision, what does it look like on the live feed?
Wow.
And how are you going to be judged on that? Which goes back to your other question when you talk about this generation and why people don't know how to respond. This generation of American soldiers, in my opinion, the guys that have served through much of Afghanistan, really since the 9/11, dealing with the shift to terrorists, terroristic warfare, and the elimination of it. These guys are judged differently. I mean, what they do. We've gone from embedded reporters to live stream on internet channels where they're watching. That's what they're judged on, and so it's no longer anecdotal. It's now there's no way for them to get away from it, and there's no way for their families to get away from it. Their wives see those videos, their kids can find those videos, and
it's insane. My perspective of that experience was big for me, and one of the questions I was asking the police officers, how does your approach differ from military? Like going into a room as a cop versus a soldier. And they didn't really have a great answer because they're obviously, some of them were in the military, but they said they think it's a little more, I don't know if this is true or not, but a little more shoot first in the military than it was as a police officer.
Well, so to me, the big difference is philosophical. And in the military, you have a 99% assurance that the people you're going to encounter are bad guys.
Right. So that's
and they're not fellow countrymen. They're not people who live in the same community as you. They're not people who shop at the same grocery store that you do. They're not potentially the same people whose kids are in your kids' baseball team, on your kids' baseball teams, or playing basketball or in cheerleading. Police officers, when they go into the room, it's not just I'm in a disconnected war zone. It's I'm in my community where my family lives and goes to church and has life, and the person that I'm facing is one of us. Man, I can't imagine.
It's complicated, and I just want to be real. Like, this is our show, and it's like I said, we'll talk about anything. But like, I feel as if I was in a room when a police officer walks in, say I have a knife in my hand, and he says, "Drop the knife." My mindset is obviously drop the knife right away, because I feel if I don't drop the knife when he says that, then I could get shot. That's how I view this. And I watched a video earlier today. This guy in New York, he had a knife, and they're like, "Drop the knife, drop the knife." And he said, "I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you." And they ended up shooting him. And it's massive backlash. But it's like, only thing I can know, if I was in that situation, I would assume that I would get shot if I didn't drop the knife.
Yeah, I don't. I've learned enough to try not to pass judgment on any particular situation, but also, we've got to be people who are cognizant of the national narrative as well. And there's a reason that there's so much backlash in our country over law enforcement involved deaths or assaults. And there's a reason that narrative is as loud as it is.
That's the gray, the areas of gray that we're talking about.
And so, it's gray. I feel for our law enforcement officers because it's another layer that's on them of scrutiny. And what kind of gets lost in that is, I'm hard pressed to think any politician runs for public office because they don't really want to make an impact. I still choose to believe that when somebody runs for office, they want to make an impact. That when a doctor becomes a doctor, he or she does so because they want to practice medicine and heal people, not because they want to bill. Right? It's not because they want to set up a business where they can bill a nickel and dime for every penny that they possibly can. They become doctors because they want to heal people, right?
Right.
Law enforcement, they become, I believe they become law enforcers, police officers, sheriff's deputies, constables, troopers, because they want to make a difference in their community.
I agree.
Again, it's another level of scrutiny on top of them. And that said, I also have no problem acknowledging the fact that we have some systematic problems in our country.
Sure.
And the manifestation of those happen to become through the most extreme situations. You know, a lot of that turmoil in our country, I believe, is real, but it's only really coming into mainstream conversation. Unfortunately, because there have been so many of these instances like this. Justified, not justified. I'm not making that judgment at all.
Yeah,
I'm just saying
I agree with you.
What I'm saying is I'm not justifying or judging any of those situations, but it certainly has brought a different light to the conversation.
Let me ask you this, because I know you have I like how you view things in your perspective, and I'm still learning about a lot of this stuff, but do you feel as if some of these things have been brought out more because it was an election year? Is that an actual thing that I've talked to people that are like, this is, because it's an election, this has been brought to light. Is that accurate in some ways, or? Because there are real issues, I agree, but it seems like that's true from my perspective.
I made a note to myself on November the 2nd, and I posted it to my Facebook page as a private note so that I'd get a reminder on November the 2nd next year. And I posted in that note to myself what the Dow Jones was at, what my personal portfolio was at, what the price of gas was, what I thought the national civility level was, and what I thought the national unity level is, and then a couple other factors. Because what I wanted to see to myself, I wanted to remind myself next year what I'm feeling on the night before the election this year. Mm-hmm. I think that politics has a way of stretching and blurring the lines of what's acceptable, and that opportunists choose to use a multitude of things that, if they think can further their agenda, they will stretch it out and change it. I don't know that that's necessarily the politicians as much as it is the people who work for the politicians, who have a job to do, who want to do their job to the best possible outcome, no matter what the cost is.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Got it. Okay, well, let's get back into your career.
Yeah, sure.
So
we can talk about anything y'all want to. I'm good.
No,
it's just kind of fun.
I like it. I enjoy it. I mean, this, it's funny because we talk about this podcast like we get to meet people, network. We're in a lot of ways we're getting master's degrees every day just talking to different people.
Good for you. Yeah.
It's really cool. But I guess but part of the process of this is to kind of get through where you're at, to try and pull out little nuggets for people that would be valuable. So I guess military, and then I know you had a pretty successful business career. Yeah. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, sure.
Part of the story.
I got out of the military and I went to work. I took a job with the local police department as an animal control guy for about a year, and then I got a job with a for-profit company that was selling development resources to churches, of all things, which turned into a great opportunity really quickly because the owner of that company was friends with the Bird and the Caruth families out of Dallas, who, effectively, if you go from downtown Dallas up 75 North, almost all of that is owned by the Birds and the Caruths. They're two of the most powerful companies, families, long-term
big
in Dallas.
Real estate families?
Big everything. They're up there with the Crows and... they're the Perot's, that kind of. But they had a museum that they had founded, and it was floundering, and they had hired my boss, his company, to come in and take over the management of that and help turn it around, help them make it profitable. It was a nonprofit museum that was just hemorrhaging money, and they needed to do something. And I got tagged, at 24 years old, maybe, something like that, to be the site manager. So here I am, overseeing the daily operations of a $20 million museum with 15 staff members, and trying to make it financially profitable. And we were able to do so in about 7 or 8 months, right? And something stuck with that, like, hey, I got a knack for this. And
Is that rare for a museum to be profitable? I never thought about it. I feel like
most museums function off from grants and endowments, and this particular museum did. It had grants and endowments, but you still want to be at least net neutral,
right,
if not make a little bit of money, right? You've got to be able to build reserves for times like this. That's the case for all nonprofits. It's catastrophic what happens to nonprofits when the economy changes or shifts, right? Because the first thing to go is the disposable income, and most donations to nonprofits are from disposable income. That's why churches struggle. That's why the Salvation Army struggles. It's why St. Jude's struggles. And it's also why they save and they plan, and they have big reserves and big investments to help offset operating costs. So for me, I figured out, man, I've got a knack for this, and I had an opportunity to work with another nonprofit, and kind of went out on my own as a 1099 guy, and I worked with a small church out in East Texas, and then a school district out in East Texas at the same time. Doing change agency stuff and helping them develop programs, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one, and that went on for about a decade, and it actually brought us to move up to North Texas from East Texas, and I met this guy one day in a lobby of a church. We had there was a school at this church that I was working with, and I met him in the lobby, and he was a builder, a home builder. At that time, I had a real estate license too, because I thought that's the easy way to make money, right? I mean, you just get your license, open up every door, you make 3%, the heavens open up, the doves come down, they sing hallelujah. There's no work in real estate at all, right? That was, tongue in cheek. I mean, that's what I thought about it.
Right.
And so I got my real estate license and actually doing really well. And then I met this guy, and he had a new custom home company. He had invested his life savings in starting it, at a long career in building, and a great guy. And we just hit it off. And he had a question. He wanted to develop a customer service program and to better take care of. He wanted to reinvent the way he took care of customers and build his company based on that. And he couldn't get anybody to understand this concept. And he shared it with me in about 5 minutes. I just got it. And so he hired me to develop a customer service program, which we did. That program won the 2008 National Pacesetter Award in the custom home industry. And so he asked me, and he called me over to his office, and he said, listen, what will it take to just hire you to run this program? And I gave him a number. And in addition to that number, I also said, I want 10 to 15 hours a week of time to do philanthropic work, to volunteer for nonprofits and not charge them. I want to be able to go help do strategic planning, help groups, and not have to charge them any money, because most of them are in trouble the way they are because they don't have any money. So why go gouge them and make it worse? And he agreed to it. And fast forward, we took that company that was at the time he hired me. I think the year before he hired me, did about $800,000 in revenue. When we had merged, started a couple more companies, added some alternative lines of income into it. Our last year together, we did a little over $10 million.
Nice.
So in just under a decade, we grew that much. We added multiple streams of income by identifying some niche markets to be part of and maximizing the efficiency around our resource allocations, which is critical to building an industry, right? You've got to learn how to create efficiencies around the things that consume resources and effectiveness around the things that generate resources, right? And there's two critical paths to business ownership. So we were able to do that, and then my wife and I had made some some good investments, and we had bought. We owned some commercial property that we actually owned outright, and owned part of an airport, and rental properties, and big car collection, and a bunch of stuff. And we had life happen, and a lot of life happen, and in a short period of time, a lot of life happened. And we kind of got to the point where we're like, what does it matter if we make all of the money in the world, and somewhere along the way we lose who we are? We're not making a difference. We're not really building a legacy. And that was what propelled me to make the change. Between 2016 and the end of 2017. Our life was just turned upside down. And in 2018, we made the decision to move and transfer out of all of it and transition. And in late 2018, took the position here in Williamson County.
CEO.
Yeah, CEO of the Williamson County Realtors, and which just happens to be mean that I'm the guy that gets to sit in the back office and work with an amazing team of people.
Yeah.
It's titles don't mean any difference, right? The people we work with are phenomenal. That staff up there, I've got some of the best staff in the entire world. I mean, they're the way they implement our service-oriented culture on a daily basis is it's unbelievable, man. It's cool. It's humbling.
It is cool, and it makes me a couple of things. What you're talking about getting everything and realizing, life's not about that. I just think about that quote. I'm pretty sure it's in the Bible. It says, like, for what does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul?
Yeah.
And that's what I thought of. But
yeah.
It's been, for me and Alex, like, we grew up here in Round Rock, and the more people we meet that are in, positions of leaderships in different roles, like, I just feel like really blessed, and like we're in a good place. Like, I've met the mayor, met the chief of police, met you. It's like, these are people that really care about what they're doing. And I just associate it with Round Rock, but it's, really...
It's bigger than that.
It's bigger than that. And I love Austin, but it is different than Austin.
Yeah.
Like, it's totally different.
No, we say it's just north of Weir. That's what we say.
And I like Austin, but this is just such a good place to be. And it's cool to have people like you that think that way, that are in charge of things that matter.
Yeah.
So, like...
so it's interesting you mentioned that scripture, because that is foundation.
Is that in Proverbs or something?
No, I think it's in the book of Matthew.
Okay.
I think. I don't know that for sure. But writing in the Torah, in the Hebrew language, written to the Jewish people, is kind of that aha moment for me. It was actually in the history in a book called Nehemiah, which you can find in the Old Testament of the Bible, but in the Jewish Torah. And it's an account of them rebuilding the city of Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. And they're building the wall. I don't know if you're familiar with it. They're building. I read the story. It's a powerful story of leadership, man. It's an incredible leadership journey, right? When you track, and this is what attracts me to it. But they're under a lot of scrutiny. The walls are caving in on them. The enemies are rallying around them. Everybody's raising the swords, and they're getting ready to attack. And the people are scared, and they're fearful of their lives, and all this stuff going on. And Nehemiah goes out walking around, and he looks at all the work they've done, and he gathers all the men together, right? And here they are at this point in time. The picture I get in my head is they got one hand, they got a weapon, their sword in one hand, and they've got a mortar in the other. They're bricking at the same time they're protecting, right? And Nehemiah gathers them together, and he's talking to him. He says, "Man, remember, it's chapter 4, verse 14, I think." He said, "Remember your God, who's so great and mighty, who's brought you this far. Mm-hmm. Go and fight." But listen to what he says, right? He says, "Go and fight for your family, for your wives, your children, your brothers and your sisters." And he says, "Go fight for your homes." Mm-hmm. Now, here's what's interesting: is when you look at the original language on that passage of scripture, the word "homes" isn't like what we think about with home. It's more like what we think about with house or dwelling. Here we think about home. Home's where the heart is, right? It's not the structure. It's the people. It's the warmth. It's the love. It's what it stands for. It's not what he was saying. He wasn't saying go fight for that. He was saying go fight for that house.
Property.
Yeah, for that property, for that house, because that house is the bedrock of who we are. And you think about, that got me on this journey of thinking, right? About when I first read that, it was like, wow. And it got me on this journey. And so I started studying housing. And I
That's
looked
a cool way to tie all this in.
So I looked at the anthropological aspect of housing. And so I went all the way back and I looked at the Mayan people, right? Or the nomadic people, rather. And so the nomadic people, when they would travel across the plains, when they would come to a place where they're going to graze for a while, they'd set up their villages in these circles, and they would interlock their tents so that it created like a fan approach on the outside, and then on the next ring inside, it was going the other way. And they did that because their homes, their houses, their tents, their dwellings created this level of protection for them from not only other nomadic tribes, but from the wild animals and everything that was just ready to devour them, right? The house was this physical level of protection. So the Mayan people, if you study the codex, you know what the codex are, all the paintings on the walls that you see, these beautiful, when you see that over 75% of the codex, over 75% that have been discovered so far have to do with the home and family life around the home and what's going on. Think about that. I mean, what's the American dream, right?
Yeah.
It's a white picket fence. It's a house with a white picket fence, no cats, a couple of dogs, maybe half a child, right? I mean, that's the American dream, right? Yeah. You know, housing is at the center of every single culture that exists. So you've got faith, you got family, and you got houses. Man, what if you're not going to spend your entire time fighting for faith or family? What better thing can you fight for? Can you labor for than housing? And laboring for housing doesn't just mean doing what I'm doing advocacy work or trying to get the right policies in place or the right legislation or the right rules or the right abilities to practice or providing services. It's helping families make decisions about what house is best for them. How can they afford it? Can they afford it? What repairs does it need? How are they going to take care of that? Does it have things that need to be adjusted so that they can bring other family members in and turn these houses that we're supposed to fight for into the ideological homes that we long for? So
that was good, man. I like that. That's pretty cool. Good to think about that because you're right. You know, what do they say? Obviously it's in the Declaration about property rights, and what I love about it is it's something that to me it can be generational, and like it's something you can build on. It's easy to understand. I think of it in a lot of ways from the investment perspective, but you know, obviously want to have my own place as well.
Sure.
But I just see how real estate can change people's lives.
It can,
and I strongly believe that it can change everyone's lives. But some people think it's not for them, and I think that they don't really realize all the aspects of it and how they can get involved.
Well, so I agree with you.
And that's part of the reason we talk about this so much is like we want people to get there.
So, you know, the question that you have to ask then is why do people not believe housing is for them, right? And that's where you start really getting into the root of what's going on and how we can structure our lives, our businesses to be profitable, to make money, and to help people. There are people who don't believe housing is for them because they've seen it evaporate.
What do you mean by housing is not for them?
So, you know, when Matt says that you run into people who don't think it's for them. They think, well, I can never afford to buy a house, or what's the point of buying a house, or I might as well just rent, or hey, let me just live with mom and dad. Or nobody in my family's ever owned a house, or all I've ever known is renting. And so they've got this kind of mindset that says,
I don't have $250,000 to buy.
Yeah, I don't have $250,000 to buy this house, or which now is no longer even really viable in Williamson County, right?
Yeah.
For the most part, which is another conversation. I don't know how much time we have, but you want to talk about powerful conversation to have, that's one to have. So there's these people who bought into that mentality. And sometimes I believe, sometimes that's because they've seen that dream evaporate. Maybe they were kids when the bubble burst in 2008, 2009. They were part of that foreclosure. They were the young kids that parents lost the house, and now all of a sudden they're displaced and had no place to go, and that was traumatic for them. There's a populace of our country. I mean, the history of housing in our country is ugly in relationship to people of color. And I have to profess, I don't know exactly what the right term is to say, but particularly to African Americans, particularly to people of Latino base.
I just want to tell you, just because we have people on our team, and I've talked to people about this, and just being real, it's like black. They're like, just say black.
Yeah,
because I felt like I'm like always.
I don't know what to say.
And I was from people on our team, NFL football player. Like I've heard them say that. And
okay,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
For the sake of this podcast, I'm cool with that. I actually like to call them Carrie or John or Don
there you go.
or whatever their name is, and I hate it. But the reality is that.
And you're talking about like redlining and
yeah, I mean, oh my gosh, man! If you study that, if you look at that, if you look at it's not. And by the way, it wasn't just redlining, it wasn't just blockbusting. But those two in themselves would have been atrocious. If you look at the mapping and the policies of our federal government, particularly in relation to backing of loans, we had a long period of time in our country where you could not get a government-backed loan, nor could a developer get a government-backed loan for putting in housing developments or for buying a house, unless it was deed restricted that prohibited black people from living in them or purchasing the houses, purchasing or leasing. I mean, that was the governmental policy, and that reigned true, even though Supreme Court ruled on it in late 1800s, early 1900s. That still was the practice. There was a systematic racism. And so I am not somebody who's benefited from directly. I can't go look and say, okay, I've generationally benefited from the ability of housing. I mean, heck, I was homeless. My parents didn't have a house, right? But then I thought about the first house that I bought, and I got a gift for the first house I was bought to help me with the down payment. It was like $1,000. I mean, it wasn't a lot of money. But my grandmother had given me like $1,000. And I think about where she got that from. Where she got that $1,000 from? She had sold her lake house in Minnetonka, Minnesota. And her and her husband had two houses. My grandfather had two houses. They were able to sell that one home up there and put all the money in the bank. So that $1,000 came to me because... So I benefited, right? Mm-hmm. She had that money because they were able to sell an investment property that they were able to buy and build wealth in. Mm-hmm. They were able to buy that house, their second house, because their first house was given to them, I believe, if I understand it correctly. It was an inheritance. So they had inherited a house, so they didn't have a house payment, so they could afford to buy a second house, right? You see how that works?
Yeah.
Generationally, for 150 plus years, that was not the case for a good portion of the populace of America, for American citizens. They could not do that. And it was not just black people. It happened to people based on ethnicities through different areas. But the people in my study that seemed to be most disproportionately affected was the black populace. And, so I think one of the questions all of us have to ask ourselves is, and be willing to actually ask ourselves the question is, what does fair and affordable housing actually look like where we live? What's the solution to some of that? How do we help create some equitable distribution, not redistribution, but how do we create systems and processes to help people who have been affected that way realize what we all long for, realize what the Mayans long for, realize what the nomadic people long for? How do we help them realize that dream and not, die under the weight of that thought? Housing's not for me.
That's good, man. Do you want to dive into the Wilco home prices like you were talking about?
Yeah, we can. Sure.
Because I was actually talking to our team about the average sales price in the Austin MLS for single-family homes recently, and I guess I don't know who released this. Maybe it was Abel or somebody, but an agent sent this to me. And in October, and it's just completely off the charts in 2020, and I'm sure it's the same thing in Wilco statistics as well. But in October, the median or the average sales price was $470
in Austin.
I don't know where all this is coming from. All I have is the graph, and it says Austin MLS single family home 5-year trend analysis through October 2020.
Okay.
But it's a straight line up. At the start of the year in January, it was $370, and then it was $470 in October. But it typically these years, follow some sort of a similar trend line. And each year maybe they get a little bit higher, maybe in terms of sales price. But in 2020, it is just completely off of the trend lines.
Absolutely is.
In terms of total listings, down, low. Sales price up high. Average, number of home sales. Start of the year, at the start of the pandemic, it was lower, but it shot all the way up and stayed higher comparatively speaking to the previous 4 years. And so I'm curious to hear what you wanted to talk about with it.
So first thing I would say is that either this afternoon or Monday, I'm going to publish the latest version of statistics for Williamson County. And I use we have a partnership with the Real Estate Center at Texas A&M that compiles that data for us. So it's the most accurate data because it takes data not only from one MLS, but from all of them. There's 5 MLSs that overlap Williamson County. And so it takes data from all of those MLSs. It takes some private off-market stuff. It's got impact or data driven from new home construction as well. So it's really accurate data. I'll release that this afternoon or tomorrow as a precursor to it. We are seeing some alarming numbers. So historically in Williamson County, and I may be a little bit off, but historically in Williamson County, like last 10 years through early 2019, we grew at about 3.3% annually on the sales price of a home. So you could go to any community. So Williamson County has just under 600,000 people in it. 190,000 of them live in population pockets of less than 15,000, so what are considered rural. And the rest of them live in populated areas where the population is more than 15,000. You could go. It didn't matter whether you went to the non-populated areas or to the populated centers. It was right around that 3.3% growth rate pretty consecutively. Some years it get up to 4, some years it dropped down to 2.5, but it was right in that 3.3% rate. 2019, we started seeing that rise, and we started seeing inventory slowing down. Prior to the pandemic, which, by the way, it has to go without, it can't go without saying that a large part of the growth in the home market and the price is because there's so much new construction happening in Williamson County. It's disproportionate amount of new construction in Williamson County versus other parts of the country. In fact, I think we're the second fastest growing county in the country in this regard, right? Just prior to the end of 2019 and beginning of 2020, we started seeing some administrative activities from Washington that were really starting to affect the way builders in Williamson County were approaching the future. We started hearing about tariffs. We started seeing new trade deals being cut, and those things were affecting items of production. So what most people don't know is even though the house is built right here, almost everything that goes into a house today comes from overseas somewhere. Lumber comes from Argentina, Venezuela, Colombia, and it comes from Canada. Faucets and light fixtures come from China. Roofing shingles are petroleum-based products. All the paints and stuff like that, they're all petroleum-based products, and the base of that petroleum comes from offshore. It's not U.S. generated, right? And so all these tariffs, all the new trade deals, while they've been good for the country as a whole and helping drive the economy up, it's also hurt some industries. And so we were seeing builders starting to struggle with that in late 2019, early 2020. And then when the pandemic hit and we shut down import-export, particularly from China, that really created problems. We're having lags in closing properties because, a spec builder's not going to close a property if it's missing a light or missing an oven. That's not their business model. That's not a custom home. It's not what they're going to do. They're not going to switch the light fixtures out. Once it's spec'd, and that's what they base their price on, and that's how they stay profitable. I don't blame them, right? And that's what they have to do. But it started delaying that building process, started extending the building process. Then you had to shut down model homes. You had to stop sales meetings. We had some builders that the inflationary rate is going up so fast that they have actually now stopped taking new builds because they're on order because they're
losing money.
Right.
What you buy today or plan on ordering for today is going to change.
Right. So what they're doing is switching to a model where they're building more speculative homes because they can wait to price that speculative home until 30 days before it's finished and know that they'll have 5 or 6 or 7 contracts the day that it's ready. We've seen the lot takedown schedule slow. We have a lot of builders now that are doing lottery systems on lots where they say, only one out of every 10 lots is available for investors. So if you're an investor looking to buy a new construction home, you got to get in line and hope you're one of the 50 people who draw that one lot to buy that one house.
Why is that? Why do they care if it's an investor or a homeowner?
I'm going to give you an empirical answer, not a scientific answer.
Yeah.
Empirically, because they know if they're selling to investors, the neighborhood is going to deteriorate faster than if they're selling to people who have a vested interest in the property.
Okay, makes sense.
And so when people are coming to build a new home, particularly at the price range that you talk about entry level house now is $300,000. $309,000 in Cedar Park. Is the midpoint house, for example. It's $314, I think, countywide. No, $314 in Cedar Park, $309 in countywide. That's still a big chunk of change.
Sure.
Right? I don't have that much in my pocket right now.
Cedar Park's really made some positive changes over the last few years, and just in terms of real estate and everything they're doing.
It's no Round Rock.
Yeah, it has from a price range, right? From a price point. Well, Round Rock has kept pace too. Mm-hmm. But I go back to my question. If all so there's this dichotomy that happens, right? I'm sorry. Let me answer your question, Alex. That's what's driving the increase in home prices. And that's not going to stop. We're actually Monday we're doing a builder panel, so all of our members can join in on that on a Zoom, where we have 3 representatives from new home construction and 3 people who do a lot of new home sales.
Do you know what time that is?
It's at 12 o'clock noon. It's a lunch and learn.
We should maybe get our team to join.
Yeah, you're welcome to. I think we're going to tape it too, and we'll have it available for our members. They can download it off the website.
Cool.
We're going to talk about exactly this, what's driving it. New home construction is constricted by inflationary causes, and that's going to slow how much new product they put on the ground. I go back to the second question, which is what are we going to do about the affordability factor of that? Because everybody who, I like a good cup of coffee and a nice meal, right? I have suits that I get dry cleaned on a regular ongoing basis. A dog needs to be groomed. I need to go to the pharmacy. I like to get food from the grocery store. I enjoy going to the big box and the little hardware store to buy trinkets to do projects with here and there. I need to have my lawn mowed. If that price of housing as a whole continues to go up as fast as it is, where's the labor pool that that is part of our society, right? That is a part of who we are as a community. Where are those entry level jobs? Where are they going to live to be able to come here to do those entry level jobs? We've got a phenomenal, like Williamson County, right? We have a phenomenal healthcare system in Williamson County. That's hard to argue, right? But the healthcare system isn't just made up of doctors making 6 and 7 figure salaries. It's made up of a whole bunch of RNs, making high 90s, low hundreds. It's made up of a whole bunch of LVNs making 30, 40. They can't live here. Teachers are having a hard time retiring here because they can't keep up with the inflationary cost of the homes that they've lived in for 20, 30 years. I was talking to one of our local teachers not long ago who had this question for me. He's like, what can y'all do to help with this? Because here I am, I've retired. I've worked for a particular local school district my entire career. I've invested. I've retired at the maximum, invested at the maximum rate I can, and I won't be able to afford to live and pay my taxes and not have to work another job when I retire. I won't be able to stay here and live in the community with the kids that I've raised and I've helped grow. And we've got to answer that question.
How do you, I mean, I know I'm not expecting you to know the answer, but I'm freshly thinking about this. Yeah. How do you solve stuff like this? I mean, I understand that there's programs where government, city, municipalities, allocate certain areas for that to keep costs down, but moving forward, I'm sure cost of land's expensive, the cost to build, taxes, how do you create something where it's affordable for somebody?
Yeah, I think that there's a multitude of answers to that, and I wish I had the one golden ticket that we could pull at Willy Wonka and all have chocolate all day, right? I don't. But
do you have a good example of another city that has? Because obviously Round Rock,
I know Mueller at in Austin, they have affordable units in certain parts, stuff like that.
So, yeah, there are places around the country that are doing things right. I can give you an example of local one. So here's a couple of solutions. Here's what I think are a few solutions to the problem. One, I think understanding opportunity zones. Senator Tim Scott championed the cause for opportunity zones, right? Understanding opportunity zones. By the way, if you're in the real estate industry and you're investing, you want to build wealth, here's a way to do it.
Yeah.
Get involved in communities that have opportunity zones available. Because when you do that, the gist behind the opportunity zone is that you're making a long-term commitment to your community because you realize most of the profitable aspect of that 7, 8, 10 years into the project, not in the first couple of years. And that helps to create wages. That helps people to opportunity zones create the ability to make commerce in a community. It creates the ability to bring a workforce in, which gives opportunity to build housing that they can afford. Because most of those in areas that have regressed in value, not appreciated in value, right?
Yeah.
So that's one answer.
I guess it's hard, and I'm always thinking hyper local. Even here,
well, that's a hyper local solution.
Well, no, but I'm saying I know there's opportunity zones here, but even those areas are still booming in a lot of ways.
Well, they are, and so that's a part of the solution. I think another part of the solution is, which, by the way, I am not a big government guy.
Yeah,
I think I kind of believe our government exists to provide for the safety and well-being of the population, right? To protect us. And to take care of the least among us, where we fail as a society to take care of the least among us. So I think one of those areas that we really need to look at is the reach that housing authorities have. I don't know how much you know about housing authorities and their reach that they have with rent augmentation and things like that. But right now, the waiting list for Section 8 housing, for housing vouchers, is far exceeds the funds that they have. And those funds are all set up based on an MSA regionalized rent pool. I think that a simple solution to part of the problem is to change the way that the vouchers are done and stop making them based on an MSA's regional rent pool, right? What the rent pool costs, and start making it based on neighborhoods. So if I have a neighborhood in in South Austin, and I can rent an apartment there for $800 a month, and get a voucher for $800 a month. Well, $800 a month isn't going to get you anything in Williamson County,
Right.
right? You can't even walk a dog across the street for $800 a month, right? I mean, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't. So why not make it regionalized? Why not say 78664? That voucher is going to be $1,300 a month.
It's currently per MSA.
Yeah, if I understand it correctly, they're much more, whether it's per MSA or it's per county, it's a much more regionalized approach. And I think we need to get micro on that.
That's a cool idea.
And I think that can, by the way, I think that works hand in hand with opportunity zones, right? I think that's a way that the government can work with private sector in opportunity zones.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And so in my senior year of college, I wrote a 30-page paper on FHA.
Oh, wow.
And so I kind of went through it. But help me understand where I may have a flaw in my thinking, because I agree, I'm less government too. Like I love the concept of no zoning in a lot of ways. Yeah. I get how it's important. But my house, for an example, I have an RV behind my house. I'm renting it out, Airbnb, $40 a night. That's super affordable. We're like, let's go put another one in, but we're not allowed to. And so my mind is like, you should allow people to utilize their properties more if you want to.
I absolutely agree with that.
Because I'm giving affordable housing right there, but I'm prevented from doing that by the government.
Yeah, by the government or by an HOA, right?
No HOA in this case, but yes.
But it's usually one of the two. And so there are a lot of municipalities around the country who have seen that and have effectively said, that Airbnb or that urban dwelling increase, the size of lot per family can change. There's real problems with that, particularly in all those developed areas. You talk about neighborhoods that are in developed areas that don't have HOA. Most of those are older neighborhoods. Let's just be real about that. Most neighborhoods have an HOA of some sort now, if they've been built in the last 20, 30 years. So when a neighborhood's developed, it's developed based on engineering factors. For example, let's calculate. Okay, a single family home, you're gonna have 2 toilets that flush, 20 times a day, whatever. I don't know what the numbers are. I'm not an engineer, right? But that puts so much demand. That parcel puts this much demand. So I need a 6-inch sewer line or an 8-inch sewer line or a 6-inch water line or an 8-inch water line. Well, you take that same single-family house,
right,
and you turn it into a fourplex, and now you've got 4 times the demand on the system. The system's infrastructure that's in place won't support it.
Right.
Now, this is one of the big reasons that cities take these approaches, is because they understand the infrastructure won't support it. The wiring coming into a house, into the fuse box, is insufficient. The water delivery for fire suppression is insufficient. The road, the roads are designed. You look at when engineers do roads for development, they look and say, okay, how many in and out roads are there going to be, and how many houses are there going to be that connect to those in and out roads, and that's what determines how wide our roads need to be, how much parking there is, what kind of sidewalks we have. Well, if you take that and you take a single-family home and make it into a fourplex, or a single-family home and put 3 travel trailers behind it, right now you've dramatically changed the infrastructure demand.
That makes a lot of sense, and never really think about it, all the way down at the
macro level,
at
micro level,
micro level.
Yeah, and so I'm an advocate of we should be able to do what we want with our properties too, but responsible property ownership also recognizes the limitations of the community. And that's one of, listen, I'll get, somebody will hear this and they'll get upset that I'm about to say this, but
that's what a good podcast is about.
A big part, well, here's controversy. A big part of the solution to the problem is we have to get off the me mentality. We're fine with affordable housing as long as it's not next to me. We're fine with new apartments going in, fourplexes, as long as it's not in my neighborhood. We're okay with diversification as long as I don't have to live in it. You know, we're okay with we're okay with the price of houses going up. As long as it's my house that's going up in value and I'm making money off of it.
As long as I'm not having to buy.
Yeah, right. And so again, I'm a capitalist, right? I believe in making money. I like making money. I enjoy making money. I like watching the money, what little resources I have, go out and make more money and come back into me. But Karen and I, we've adopted a mentality that says those who are entrusted with a lot are going to be held accountable for what they do with it. And we think that, we have to, as for me and my family, I know we have to look at things a little bit less me and more what's our community need. And at the end, because at the end of the day, you think about it, right? At the end of the day, we're depriving ourselves of some tremendous opportunities. When we say we don't want people that don't look like us to live in our neighborhoods, what we're effectively saying is I don't want to be exposed to a different culture. Right. I don't want to learn about a different heritage and a background. And we're denying ourselves, and we deny our children that opportunity, right? When
I get it.
Yeah, and so, are we gaining a lot of money, wealth? Probably. Is that the ultimate goal, is just to make money? Not for me.
I hear you. One of the things that I am most proud of with our businesses is our real estate brokerage is very diverse. Yeah. We have all different types of people. And it's really what makes us similar is our mindsets. Yeah. That's about it. Yeah. And it's pretty cool because I agree. Good. That's 100%. I mean, that's not how I view it, but I hear you completely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a macro problem. It's a narrative issue. And I've long said you want to change anything in the world, all you have to do is change the economics and the language, and you can change anything. If you change the resources and the language, you can make any change you want to make. You just have to be willing to do it.
Complex issues, man.
Complex,
I like it,
man.
I like it. Yeah. Back to the, there's not always one answer, but it's important
not always
to
one answer.
Talk through it, think about it. You're planting seeds in my head. I want to, one day get involved on a political level, and it's good to have different perspectives. And
I've got a friend up in the Dallas area, John Crutchfield, Dr. John Crutchfield. He's I met him of all places at an airport in Memphis, Tennessee. I was there for some building thing, and he was, I don't know what he was there for. And we just struck up a conversation in the airport, and we've become friends since then. And he's a black guy, phenomenal business mind, professor at university, I think in Mississippi. And, I'm watching him do stuff with his life right now to make a difference. And so he's invested in a lot of real estate, rental properties and real estate in Mississippi, doing a lot of redevelopment work in inner city Mississippi towns. He's bringing investors from around the country into pools of people to invest in these towns so he can make a difference. And now he's starting to work with taking homeless veterans, mental health issues, and using some of the profits of the investment pool to return an investment to the investors, and some of it to help the community on a greater level. I look at guys like that and I stand in awe. Man, I'm admire what they're doing, because that's examples of people who say, we're going to make a living and we're going to make good money, but and we're going to help people, but we're going to do something to give back to our community. We're going to understand that there's issues here that the government can't solve on its own, nor should the government solve. It's our responsibility to reach out to our communities.
And I love that you say that.
And so right here where we work.
I feel like a lot of things that people complain about or have very strong opinions on, they're not actually doing a lot in reality on that. And I really strongly believe that. It's like a lot of people just talking, but what are you doing on an everyday active basis to actually fight this other than complaining? Yeah. Yeah. We can all make massive difference one step at a time, right? Yeah. So I hear you. And I guess one thing that people always feel like they got to get to a point where you're making money to start doing that. And I don't think that's true.
That's not true at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have that much, man, but I can tell you when I had nothing, I was still trying to do stuff to help people.
You know, you can go give your time.
Yeah, you can. You know, when my best friend in the world's name's Britt Cumby. His parents, Terry and Diana, I met them, met right before our freshman year in high school, right? They lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house in not the best part of town in Garland, Texas, right? Raising their boys, and they just kind of adopted me. It was one of the couches I surfed on a lot, or I stayed. And his parents invested in me. You know, whenever I'd go over there, they had a meal for me. When Diana would go shopping and buy Brit clothes, she'd oftentimes buy me clothes.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was that kind of people. They didn't have that much, right? They didn't have bass boats. They didn't have airplanes. They didn't have motorcycles. They didn't have 3 cars. They didn't have a big house. But they took what they had and they invested it back into people. And they put a little bit aside for themselves, and they put a little bit aside for people. And they ended up retiring really well. Not big, high-paying jobs. They're blue collar workers, right? I think Terry worked in a warehouse at Texas Instruments, and Diana worked in the pharmacy. I remember at Kroger's or something like that. So they're blue collar folks, but they didn't wait until they had millions of dollars to take care of people. They just reached out to their community and looked for the need that they could help, and that's who they helped. You know,
everyone do their parts.
Everybody
right?
do. You know, how hard is it? I mean, if we can buy the next person in line Starbucks and pass it forward, right? How hard is it to take that same money and do something to help somebody with a house, or do something to help somebody pay an electric bill, or work together with 10 other people who are willing to do it and pool some money and say, hey, we'll make a difference here.
Yeah. Well, I don't say this to give us credit, but I think it's a point. Our main marketing guy's been out. His wife's very, very sick, and we pay him a good salary. We've been paying him for the last 2.5 months. He's not working for us. Yeah. And the reason I say that is, like, that's not even for me. Like, I feel like I'm doing good. It's something that I feel that we have to do. Yeah. And if we're taking that personal responsibility, like, this is the right thing to do. It is. And if you can approach life that way, things work out.
In 17, I got sick. Like, I was, diagnosed 6 months to live, kind of sick, right? And they'd misdiagnosed me, by the way, but I was still sick. It was life-changing, not life-ending, but it'd still make you think. And, man, I'll tell you, part of the reason I love realtors so much is during that time, it was realtors, when the casserole dinner stopped coming from church, and our family was like, whatever. It was the people in the real estate world who were reaching out to me, reaching out to my family. They were helping me take care of business without taking any money from it. They were going to closing transactions. Because I couldn't walk to the mailbox. I was only awake an hour a day for a little while, and I'll never forget. That's why I do what I do. It's part of the reason I do what I do now, is because it was realtors, people in the real property industry that said, I can do without this to help another human being, and that's the kind of stuff that tells us who we really are, right?
Yeah, we have, we've probably had 50 podcasts, and most of them are real estate related in some way. And just a lot of great people doing a lot of cool things. And there's a lot of people that have come from nothing, and that this has provided a whole new world for them. And it's really special to see that.
It is for me. I mean, the real property industry has been good to my family. I mean, make no doubt about it. And you can't do it just by selling real estate. And we were diversified in what we were doing. We didn't have all of our eggs in one basket, but it's been pretty good.
And it's a long game, right?
It is a long game.
It's not a get rich quick.
No, God, no, man. I'm fortunate that I had enough business experience coming into real estate to be able to run a real estate business. It's not easy. It's work. but it's worth it. And it can be good for those people who want to labor.
Right.
You know, I think it's, you talk about things that keep you up at night. One of the things that keeps me up at night is, you know, the next time we have a big market crash like we did in 2008, which we will have, you know, how many of my agents aren't going to make it through that? You know, how many of the people we have, we have 2,100 agents here in Williamson County. Last year, we served just over 5,200 people in the last 12 months that we helped somehow in the real estate, whether it's a class or MLS or something like that. You know, we've got 3,500 different subscriptions through our service. So it's not a little entity. It's not huge, right? It's not the biggest in the nation, but it's not small.
Right.
And I recognize that, you know, that 5,000 people, man, that represents 5,000 small businesses. Mm-hmm. And what's going to happen to those people if they haven't learned what it truly takes to be successful? And
you're right.
And haven't learned the discipline of it.
We talk about that frequently.
That's a big reason why we do a lot of this is we're trying to give value out. Because we preach to our agents, hey, make money on every aspect, be investing. You know, if someone's out there closing 5 deals in a month, I'm saying, hey, you know, make sure you're putting that money to good use.
Yeah, put some away, do something good with it, and spend the rest on investing back into the business. Right?
How are you getting better? You know, what are you doing to find more leads? Are you relying on someone providing you leads, or you go out and drumming up your own business? Are you getting referrals? Are you, you know, constantly growing and learning? And you're right. I mean, we have a lot of people come on this podcast and say the same exact thing that you did is everything's great right now, but as soon as it turns the other way, there are 15,000 something agents in Austin.
I think so. Something like that.
I mean, close to that. Yeah, there's
and like, you know, how many are going to be around when things get really rough?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, and man, I tell them it's if you want to be successful for the long game. So here's where we stop short. This is, you're going to talk about business, right? Here's where we stop short. Everybody's thinking about how do I get the next transaction, right? Everybody's like, how do I get that? That's what we kind of approach real estate doing, is thinking about how do we get the next transaction. Mm-hmm. I think that's the fallacy. I think that's why so many real estate agents fail. I think that's why about 32% of licensees in Texas transition every year. Right, so because we're only thinking about the next transaction. What we need to be thinking about is a different question, and that question is, how do we do the next transformation? So if we approach business by trying to transform people and transform their lives, as opposed to just getting a transaction done, if we'll do that, then we can build for the long game, right? And so, because transformation says, I care about you. Right. And transformation doesn't stop when the transaction's over. Transformation is something that continues on, you know. So you're not always looking for the next lead. You're also taking care of the people you've already served. And that's where, my estimation, what I watch, the greatest majority of real estate agents fail at. They get the deal done, and then they never follow back up with that person. They don't stay in touch, and it's just become a transaction. Being transformational is easy. It's a product of doing 3 things and 3 things only. And if real estate agents will do those 3 things, they will be unbelievably successful for the long haul.
I agree completely. I've got
Hit us with the 3 things.
Yeah. So number 1, you have to be intentional.
Okay.
Right. You have to intentionally choose what you're going to do. If you're going to be a remodeler, then be a remodeler. If that's what you only want to do. If you're going to be a remodeler and a real estate agent, then do that. Mm-hmm. But make sure you're working intentionally the same pool, right? You're looking for the same people. If you're going to sell new, help people buy new homes, and you're going to list existing properties, and you're going to remodel, and you're going to build, and you're going to have flips, and you're going to have rentals, and you're going to tap in a lot of different income streams, which I encourage you to do. Figure out the way intentionally that you can bring those all together, right? So you intentionally make this decision to say, this is what I'm going to do. This is my strategic plan. I'm going to intentionally do these things. Secondly, you have to be consistent. So it's not enough to just decide I'm going to do those. weight loss doesn't end on January 31st, right? You know what I mean? We can't pledge to say, hey, I'm going to lose weight next year and stop working out on January 20th and think you're going to lose 20 pounds. It's a product of being consistent. So whatever it is you decide you do, you have to be consistent about doing it. The person that I know in real estate that I personally know, the most successful person I know, is going to do $400 million a year, has a huge team. His team's big enough now that he has a CEO that runs his little team for him, right? I mean, it's that much. He'll tell you every day he gets up, and from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock, he makes telephone calls. You know why he makes telephone calls? Because it's what he's good at, and he knows if he consistently makes telephone calls, he can continue to stay in touch with those people and help them. So you got to be consistent about whatever you're intentional on. And third, you have to invest. You've got to invest in people, and you've got to invest in yourself. You have to determine that the competition for the alternative use of your resources is incredibly high. And you've got to choose where you're going to invest your resource of time, your resource of money, your resource of skill set, your resource of intelligence, your resource of empathy. You've got to choose where you're going to invest those, and you've got to invest that in people, right? You've got to reach out and do that. And if real estate agents will do just those three things, practice transformational leadership, which is really what it is, unbelievably successful. I mean, that's what we did in our companies. We were really intentional about what we did. We got consistent and tapped into a specific market, and we built everything off from that market. Everything.
That's awesome.
And that's still the case. My guy that was my partner is still doing it today and still working. I talked to him yesterday. Still knocking it out of the park.
Well, that's great stuff, man. I think that's really valuable. And I think we should definitely do another episode because we could keep going. We all got stuff to do today.
I see your phone blowing up. And mine in my pocket over here.
We really appreciate you coming on.
No, I appreciate the invite. Yeah, anything we can do for our members, we're glad to. We're proud to have your company as members at our association, and I know we serve several of your agents, and hope to serve more in the future. And look forward to partnering. We love our brokers and our agents, and that's what we're here for. We're here to bring value to you.
Thank you. Well, guys, if you have any comments or questions, hit us up. Bryan, thanks again.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
What are ways people might be able to reach out or get a hold of you?
Yeah, you know what? People can call me. I tell them the easiest way is to call me or text me. My personal cell phone number, ready? 940-206-9372. I have an open door policy, so anybody can call, text, and we can figure out the when and the where to have a cup of coffee or sip a glass of whiskey, and
there you go.
I'll give people time.
Get some knowledge. You got some knowledge.
I don't know if I have any. I don't know that I do. Man. I don't think that. I just I care about what I do, and I care about real property and in this industry. They can call the association, Williamson County, or visit us at wcrealtors.org, of course. But easiest way to get me is call me on my cell phone.
Call Bryan. Hit us up if you need a connection. Happy to introduce.
Yeah,
Thanks
absolutely.
again, Bryan.
No, thank you, man.
Thank
See you. Good.